Sorry. Alright, sorry. I'm assuming if this is like Monster Hunter related things, then yeah, I guess it's. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. No, 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 no. Alright, hold on. I want to make sure if I get this right. Alright, here we go. It was a confusing one, to be exact, because of the... Which one was that can be gotten rid of. Alright, Alright, it's this one. It's this one. I'm just gonna have to do this before we actually go with it. I mean, the real reason why I thought it was maybe appropriate to have this type of videos on the reaction channel, and not that, because I had the feeling that it should, because it's gaming content, really, I can get that. I have to be on my own. Shit. Excuse me 1 second. I'm sorry, I'm trying to, like, do something, like, have my thought process so I can just, like, tell what's exactly is going on, etc. Fucking etc. I had a feeling I've been... Alright. Never mind about that. I'm just trying to keep on focusing on something. Although I do have to apologize for, like, without the screaming and all that, because that's only because I got so angry. Sure. Okay then. Sorry, I just had to do something. So this is just chilling with an old friend of mine. Alright. So this is what I want to watch as a first thing, by Eurytic, whatever his name is. It is. Now let's watch him.
Unused content and concepts have always engrossed me.
Oh, sorry, it's just that this is the first Monster Hunter art concepts. And yeah, Ida was supposed to be in Resident Evil Village, but apparently she did not.
Learning about all the different ideas that got thrown around in the development phase, or even some background world building not touched on in the final release, is just very intriguing. And recently, I found myself looking into the unused ideas and concepts of Monster Hunter, primarily
That one.
the first one. Now, I have not played the original Monster Hunter. The closest I got was playing Freedom
And I almost
Unite
lost
back in
my
the day,
sanity.
and I did not get far in it. However, learning about the original Monster Hunter and what it was meant to be, and how the series even got its start, was enjoyable enough for me that I wanted to share all this stuff with you guys in hopes that you get enjoyment from it too. But to start, a little history lesson.
Alright.
The original Monster Hunter on PS2 was the result of Capcom, who, much like a lot of people at the time, was enamored by the PS2 and what it had to offer. It had good processing power, online capability,
Oh yeah, I heard so many histories like saying that sales markets are going like that would be instantly sold out because of how good it is. Same with the PS5, which I luckily got it.
and it wasn't the Dreamcast.
Dreamcast. Wait, is that a thing to roast Sega?
So Capcom tasked their production studio One with making three
Yeah,
games
that was
that would
the
take
end of,
advantage of these
that was the
features.
last
The first of these
console
games
Sega.
was Auto Mod Lisa, or as the announcer puts it,
Auto Mona Lisa!
that is
Yeah,
the most Capcom game announcer that's ever been, and it's in
Oh
a
yeah, I think this is for online.
racing game. It's a nice looking racing game too. Really digging the cel shaded aesthetic. Almost looks like it would be an Initial D game at first glance. I had never even heard of this game before making this video, and it looks arcadey enough that I kinda want to give this game a try one of these days.
Yeah.
But either way, the second game in this trifecta was Resident Evil Outbreak, which
Oh, Resident Evil Outbreak.
took the old school RE formula and threw it online, making it so randos all over the world could brave through the elements together, which sounds like the true horror if you ask me. And as you'd expect, the last game they made was Monster Hunter,
Yep,
and if
Monster
you
Hunter.
had never looked into how this game is, boy is it weird to look back on, especially if you're like me and you started at around 3 Ultimate. First off, you did not start off with a starter weapon for each weapon type. You only started off with sword and shield, and
Yeah,
there were
that's-
only 7 weapon
that's
types
true.
in all. Great sword, sword and shield, dual blades, hammer, lance, light bowgun, and heavy bowgun. Yeah, no longsword, no hunting horn, not even a bow. Second, there were quite a lot of materials that were only in online quests, but this didn't just entail stuff like monster parts. It was also stuff like Dragonite ore and Firestone, which means that if you didn't have the ability to play online or went back to this game after the servers died, you had no way of making any of the equipment that required this stuff, which is always a joy. And the last thing of note, you attacked with the right analog
Yeah.
stick.
I did that.
Yeah, it
That
was
bothered
supposed
me.
to simulate swinging your weapon, which I guess I kinda get. But as a result, this meant that camera movements were relegated to the D-pad, which means that yes, the claw was not a
Yeah, I actually
PSP
did the
only
claw,
thing.
too.
It was in fact a thing since the very beginning. Add all these factors up, and the fact that Capcom barely advertised the game over here, and it's a
true.
wonder why it took several years for this series to take off in the West. That aside,
Yeah,
though,
true.
the really interesting thing about Monster Hunter is what it was originally going to be and all the things that didn't get to be in this first
Wait, is that supposed to be what the cam looks like?
installment, which without further delay will finally be what we're discussing today. See, the original concept for Monster Hunter, while always intended to be a fantasy setting, was actually going to lean in harder into the high fantasy area, with D&D-esque classes, magic, and more. These details were disclosed in the Monster Hunter Illustrations art book, which is where 95% of the information presented in this video is coming from. In it, there's a section called Staff Comment, where 3 members of the staff discuss how the foundation of Monster Hunter was formed, but we're only going to focus on 2 of the members, Tomonori Kanbei, the lead designer for the game, and Kaname Fujioka, the series world supervisor and director. Mainly because the last one, Iraya, only speaks once and just talks about the butterfly armor, which, despite it being pretty and the artwork here being cute, not exactly what we're here for today.
Yeah.
Kanbei and Fujioka start by saying, "We started off with a vague idea to start an online action game. The core idea, which was to team up with others in an effort to defeat monsters, was something that was presented right from the start and never changed. We had it in our heads that this was going to be a fantasy game, so our ideas tended to gear towards magic and the like. The world as a whole was much more fantastical as well. I doubt any of us expected it to turn out as analog. As you might have guessed by now, the early Monster Hunter..."
You know, I'm watching this right now because one of the members of the server that I am in, Snowfall, shout out to them, actually found this video, and there's another video I found. So we're going to be watching those.
Hunter world was pretty rough around the edges. It was all about killing, a simple concept that was easy to understand. We didn't want to dumb down the whole killing monster aspect of the game, so you'd still get that full on with the present Monster Hunter world. We retained the basic idea of getting together with other people to take down the big baddies, but we did stray away from bringing any moral ideas into it. This is how the world of Monster Hunter gradually took shape. Which makes sense. You don't want to bog down a gameplay-focused game by wondering about the ethics of hunting down big beasties, especially for the first entry in a new IP. Gotta keep it simple and focus on the core idea before splintering off into deeper constructs. This last bit I want to read before we get to the fun stuff is a bit of a primer that I want you all to keep in mind going forward. All of the designs and concepts that we had early on evolved with the world, but those design concepts were merely part of the project proposal, and the real design work started once we had a solid grasp of the world we were trying to create. As I recall, we had the designers dishing out whatever crossed their minds as they tried to imagine this new world, and we selected the ones that really stuck out to put into the game itself. When we got down to the nitty-gritty of what kind of game Monster Hunter is going to be really, that was when we dropped the whole magic system. One of the earliest concept movies we created showed a few hunters laying traps and luring a monster to these traps. In those movies, the monsters were always very generic fantasy monsters like red dragons. Not only were they archetypal dragons, we also had them climbing out of the depths of ancient ruins where they had no doubt been napping on a huge treasure hoard, so the game itself didn't have a strong connection to nature itself at first. Still, the whole hunter flavor was well established, with the characters wearing pieces of the monsters they hunted, like scales and shells. From the brainstorming and planning stages, we eventually tried putting some of the ideas into illustrations, and the whole process took about 2 years. And now, I think we can get into the specifics of what exactly these illustrations turned out to be.
I want to get rid of that.
I think we should start with the biggest section of the art book, the goblins. Many different types of goblins at that, from the standard kind that wore masks on their horns
the goblins.
to act as decoys against predators, to
Well, I mean, we have Shekalakans. I think they count as goblins. Yeah, they actually do count as goblins. Right, yeah, that's right. I'm here to delete a thing I have. Yep. Excuse me 1 second. So far I have 2 videos removed. These wings.
the hyena goblins, which were swift and could run on all fours while fleeing, a goblin type that mimicked monster hunters using their discarded or stolen weapons against them.
Yep, looks like Shakalakans.
them, the desert goblin who wore cacti on their head and burrowed into the sand to
that's
surprise
not
attack
smart.
prey, this cool tunnel goblin that had a mushroom-like mask and looks like it would have glowed in the dark, and this other take on that idea where they instead use flashbugs to light their paths. And then there's the forest goblins, which as you can see were half tree and had 4 classifications: standard, scavenger, berserker, and minor. According to a staff comment by Fujioka, all of these goblins were set aside for the longest time before the idea for them was turned into the Shakalakas from Monster Hunter 2.
Shakalaka.
Fujioka goes on to say, I saw them as mascots or some other cute presence like a forest critter or small tribe. Having said that, I can't really explain why these early drawings of them carry such a creepy vibe.
Yeah.
Also, as a quick side
I
note,
guess.
for people like me who started the series at 3, yeah, the Shakalakas were not a thing that was started there. They were from the game we never got over here in the States, Monster Hunter 2, or DOS. I don't know
Actually,
why
I
it's
think
called
it's,
DOS. Maybe they thought Spanish sounded cool. But either way, the last goblin I wanted to give attention to was this one, a cat-like goblin. It's to be
we got that
assumed that this
pie
design in
nose.
particular eventually
links
led to
there.
the cat goblin moniker,
And the
which resembles the felines we know today. A very interesting idea that bloomed from this goblin phase was the fortress dragon. This is probably my personal favorite out of the unused concepts, and is one that I would love to see happen the most. This massive behemoth had formed a symbiotic relationship with the goblins, the goblins protecting its fragile shell from harm, while the dragon's immense size scares away any predators that would want to attack the goblins. My favorite thing about this monster, besides the just neat idea in general, look at how small the hunter is, and then how big this thing is.
Oh, wow.
Like, could you imagine if they put this thing in Monster Hunter Rise? Like, you're wire bugging and running up this thing's legs, and a bunch of cats are shooting arrows or firing cannons at you, and you gotta seize the fortress, get to the shell of the dragon, you end up hitting it until it breaks, causing the whole thing to come crashing down, and the second half of the fight happens where you're attacking its exposed flesh while the dragon's flailing about on a rampage or something. Like, I know that's not the best or most original idea, but you could workshop it or do something, man. It's so cool looking. Having a monster where half of the challenge is even gaining the ability to damage it is not something that's been done often, and if my very small vernacular didn't make it apparent enough, I really like this concept and think it's rad. I really hope it ends up being in a future game someday, even if it's not in Rise. Alright, next I wanted to bring mention to this, the prototype wyvern.
Oh yeah, the Wyvern Rex. I guess they're using their early concept as way of evolutions. I'm just gonna say that that's actually kind of cool of them. Excuse me one second, guys.
This is most likely what Kanbei meant when he said they had designed generic fantasy monsters like bright dragons, since it is a lot more standard of a dragon design than what we would get with the Rathian and Rathalos. But really I bring mention to it because of how they indicate what parts of the monster would have been used for attacks, and what parts would be, well, broken or cut off to get materials from. It's a nice peek behind the veil in how the team views the monsters they design, or at least did. I don't know exactly if this method is still used internally nowadays, but it would make sense if it was. Here, we have another monster that has a symbiotic relationship, this time with the botany of the area. The crab monster, using a demon cactus, fills up on water at an oasis before traversing through the massive desert. This one is a bit more background-based than gameplay-centric, but it is still a neat idea. We have a lot of crab enemies in the series, but they're normally just standard big crabs with big shells and sometimes bigger.
Yeah. Turn that.
claws, so it's fun to see something different, even if it didn't make the cut.
I think that's how the Beta Day was made, which is a monster that is from Monster Hunter Online.
Next up, we have the Panther Dragon, or Leopard Dragon as it were. Most likely a prototype of the Nargacuga. The information given is pretty interesting, such as this blurb for the model concept, informing the modelers that they should prepare several corpse models with the body cut in two or with a dismembered part such as head, tail, or wings. And the mention of several there makes me wonder if they really wanted to get visceral with the details and have the monster get torn apart in different ways depending on what side of the body you were cleaving the most. Another interesting part is the blurb about the wings. It says the hardened wings on its back act as a natural shield, and that by cutting its wings during battle, the Panther Dragon can be made vulnerable to ranged weapons, really pushing the cooperative angle of the game a lot more, which of course makes sense since Monster Hunter was supposed to push the online capabilities of the PS2. Seeing as most of the series can be tackled alone nowadays, we don't really see stuff like this often, but I dig more monsters that incentivize teamwork. Of course, I have to mention this part about the tail. By anchoring its tail to a tree with its sharp tail, the Panther Dragon is able to pull off many acrobatic moves. The tail can be crafted into axe-type weapons, meaning that while the switch axe was still a far-off idea, they did think to have axes during the conceptual phase of the first game. Lastly, this mention of the horn being used to make a spear did at first make me think that this was where the seeds were first sown for the insect glaive, but then I was reminded that the lance was in the first game, and that probably is what happened to the spear. Still, it is interesting to think that an axe of some sort was almost part of the initial weapon lineup.
Yep.
Alright, now we have my second favorite monster design that didn't get used, the Mold Dragon, or Jaw Wyvern as it's labeled in the book. This thing has a heightened sense of smell since, as you can see,
I guess this is before Balfasag, right?
the mole is kind of taken over its eyes. It meanders about since, again, can't see, tracking you by smell. And the biggest thing of note, it attacks with mold breath, which would reduce the effectiveness of cloth and leather armor, and would make any food and herbs you brought inedible. So all of those well-done steaks to keep your stamina up, and all those herbs you brought to make extra potions would be at risk of getting completely wasted. Now, this concept has not been fully utilized to my knowledge, but we did get a monster that's blinded by moss, and that's the Black Veil Val Hazak in Iceborne.
On the variant.
I get why we never got this mechanic, since it might be considered too frustrating to deal with and would probably lead to people just avoiding it until they got way better gear and weapons to completely trivialize the fight. But much like a lot of these ideas, I'd at least like to see it once in any of these games. Next, we have a sort of quick shot of monsters that either just have a design or don't really have much said about them in the book, like these tree-like beasts right here. This jelly frog that shot out eggs that hatched into babies to defend the mama, a concept used amazingly for the Giganox in 3.
Yep.
This alligator flytrap-like creature that reminds me of that thing from Gantz. This nameless brute wyvern that looks like a prototype version of the Deviljho. A condor wyvern. A lion dog wyvern that maybe was a prototype design for the Diablos. A Kirin that has scales and multiple horns, making me kinda appreciate the electric unicorn we got a whole lot more. This thing called the Crypt Hydra, which seems to have finally been utilized in the series as the Nakarkos. These two, the Coelacanth dragon and the eel beast.
I mean, yeah, they say it's not extinct, but it's rarely seen.
Which could imply that underwater combat may have been an idea thrown around as far back as the first game, though the Coelacanth has mentioned that you can ride on its fins like it's a Shadow of the Colossus boss, which would have been very interesting. And then there's this, the Gas Dragon concept, which seems to eventually give rise to the Yamasukami from 2, but it's labeled the Tower Octopus for this design in particular. And this Gas Dragon concept looks like a Zeppelin, which is pretty funny. He's a chunky boy. I do want to spend a bit more
Amatsu, yeah. It could be based on Matsu.
time on the Gas Dragon though, because its design is really cool. It functions like a hot air balloon, heating the air inside of its head with a heated stomach, and controls its speed and altitude by expelling air from its holes and its limbs. All of which is super rad, and this Yamasukami prototype is pretty fun too. It has eggs blocking its gas organ, and it's said you can get rid of these to cause a gas leak. It goes on to say that if the tower octopus were to try and expand during this time, much more gas would be expelled that could result in a massive explosion if any source of fire were to come in contact with it. Which means that even if you were to make this thing go to sleep, it's probably not the best idea to bomb it. We talked about a lot in this video, but I'd say we are about ready to close this off with one final concept that still to this day has been left on the cutting room floor. A lot of people probably know about this whole thing, but a video about unused monsters and concepts from Monster Hunter would not be complete without talking about the Equal Dragon Weapon.
Oh, the Equal Dragon Weapon.
You see, one of the concepts during the design phase was that there was going to be this ancient civilization that, as you'd assume, would have technology so advanced and beyond anything that we in the present would have, and yeah, it's a pretty cliched idea, but this was back in like 2000, so it was still kind of fresh at the time. Either way, this ancient civilization was said to have committed a forbidden act that led to a great war between dragons, and this civilization nearly met its end with the dragons almost wiping them all out. This forbidden act is known simply as the Equal Dragon Weapon.
Yep.
This thing is the result of that civilization wanting to make something on par with an Elder Dragon. So they took the bodies of 30 dragons and mashed them together into this Frankenstein's monster of flesh, bone, and machinery. The artwork is so haunting. Just this massive, grotesque creature strung up in what the blurb explains is an ancient storage facility in some ruins. This decrepit bioweapon left to rot in storage for eons that this small lone hunter just stumbled upon? Good grief. If there is anything that I talked about today that better represents how incredibly out there and fantastical they went with the concepts for Monster Hunter, it has to be the Equal Dragon Weapon.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
And that will sadly do it for today. Trust me, I would have loved to make this a 50-minute plus video going over all the games and their unused ideas or prototype designs, like this Lagiacrus that's a full-on Leviathan, this frog with a dragon for a tail, this massive whatever it is, and this monster that was supposed to resemble a fist, who would punch the living tar out of your hunter before uppercutting them to the stars. Stuff like that I would love to tell you more about, but there's no translations for these books, leaving me with not too many options.
Well, you can use Google
Maybe someday I'll be able to gab about these, but until then, that'll do it for this video. With Monster Hunter Rise's expansion coming soon, I really wanted to get a video about the series done, since I will most likely be playing that game.
Wait, since when was it? Oh, 8 months ago, so I guess it's that.
All of this month. I hope all of you enjoyed this video and thought it was interesting. And of course, thank you all so much for watching. Be safe out there. I'll see you guys next time, and take care.
Alright, at least we got those. Nope.
EQ?
No. Alright, so this is the one it's the World of Monster Hunter. Okay, yeah, no ads. I don't want ads. Ah.
Our world is full of wonders.
Yeah.
Every corner, every plane, every forgotten nook of our planet presents a wealth of wonders so full that one could spend a lifetime admiring each and every one. To better understand our place in the natural world, it is useful to understand and to map out that world first. Thankfully, the Royal Paleontology Scriveners of the Hunters Guild have been busy doing exactly that, and their findings about the geography and the mapping of the world will be presented here. Before the mappings
like
of the
a
guild can be presented,
documentary.
it must be understood what the guild actually is, however. The average person living in cities and towns leads a normal life. Monsters rarely factor in. But the world is large and dangerous, and beyond city walls lies a land fierce and untamed. The frontier.
Yep.
This is not one place, but rather a term collectively referring to the spaces between major urban centers, where the power of man is dwarfed by the iron fist of nature. So while some areas may be within the borders of an established country, they may be overrun by the wilderness, and thus considered part of the frontier. These areas cause issues, as they are filled with the dangerous creatures we call monsters. While the large cities and their walls are generally safe, the villages and towns surrounded by the frontier, as well as the merchants and tradesmen that must travel through it, are not.
Yeah.
Everyone who ventures into it is threatened to be swallowed by the frontier. Thus, a profession emerged specifically to tip the scales and tame the frontier somewhat: the monster hunter. These brave individuals push back against the wyverns and beasts of the frontier, and in doing so protect the populace. But isolated heroes were not enough. It was uncoordinated, messy, and inefficient. Over time, independently from one another, the various regions of the world figured that in order to effectively balance mankind against nature, these monster hunting efforts needed to be coordinated and organized. And so, various hunting guilds began popping up all over the globe, generally independent, but all dedicated to the cause. As these guilds were generally operated from large settlements either near or inside the frontier, word got around quickly that they all had a goal in common. Thus, before long, the many hunting guilds of the world entered into a unified front. While there are and were many guilds made up of hunters, the Hunters Guild refers to the collective organization of all of these different groups, as well as various research, farming, and blacksmithing unions. All the groups within the larger guild retain their independence and act mostly within their own jurisdictions and interests. Many villages even produce unique hunting styles and methods, with certain skills only being trained in a few select regions of the world. There are, however, some core basic values and rules that they all follow. 4 hunters maximum per quest.
Yep.
Hunting assignments must be gated by requirements to avoid newbies biting off more than they can chew. Hunting without permission of the guild is forbidden.
Yep.
All of these rules, as well as cooperation between the various factions, are maintained and coordinated through Dundorma, one of the largest and richest cities on the old continent. The original Dundorman Hunters Guild was led by His Immenseness, an enormous Wyverian who founded a team specifically to investigate the mighty Elder Dragons. When the hunting guilds united and time came to elect a central administrative hub, His Immenseness and Dundorma were fairly obvious choices. While the guild doesn't have a capital or a grand guildmaster in theory, Dundorma and His Immenseness fulfill those roles in practice, as their authority and power are widely respected across the known world. The Hunters Guild takes in requests from various civilians, organizations, and other actors across the lands. They are then assessed and compiled into quests by quest handlers, which are highly proficient administrators who distribute these quests to the various hunters and keep track of their status and payment. The guild takes a cut of all value produced during hunts, its main source of income. The guild's dealings with monster materials and the various values they assign to them are also a major factor to the economy of any area that includes a hunter's guild. Besides this, The guild also funds and conducts research into taxonomy, history, and ecology. Essentially, every possible kind of science known to man has benefited from the guild's efforts thus far. One of the largest and most consistent efforts within the guild, besides its regular hunting activity, is the mapping and cartography of the known world, which is spearheaded by the Royal Paleontology Scriveners of Shrade.
Yep, sure.
Located on the western end of the Old World continent, the Shrade region is believed to be the birthplace of the Hunters Guild. Right through the middle runs the Hinmerun mountain range, which naturally splits the region into 3 segments: West Shrade, East Shrade, and the southern Arcolis region. Once, this entire area was unified under the prosperous Shrade Kingdom. It was a thriving empire that etched itself into all historic records. That is, until one dark day, a millennia ago, the kingdom simply vanished. The massive empire of Shrade just ceases to appear in the historic record.
Yep.
The Legend of the Black Dragon, a poem passed down through generations in the region, tells of how this very kingdom was brought to its knees by an exceptionally powerful dragon, burned to ash in but a single night. Whatever may have caused its end, it is an observable fact that the once great Shrade kingdom is no more. The old capital, Castle Shrade, now stands alone at the northern shore, a futile reminder of a long forgotten tragedy. Today, the Shrade region is no longer ruled by one kingdom, instead having split into an eastern and western faction. West Shrade is ruled by the mighty city of Verudo, crowned by its massive fortress. While the city is powerful and protected, it is internally struggling with an increasing class divide, as the rich live inside of the walls while the poor live outside.
Oh, wow.
East Shrade, meanwhile, is commanded by the merchant town of Riveru, which controls many essential trading routes.
Oh.
Riveru and Verudo are not on good terms for reasons that a hunter must not concern themselves with. It suffices to know that mentioning one in the presence of the other is a less than optimal idea. As far as the Hunters Guild is concerned, the Shrade region is full of opportunities and locations, as the frontier runs through the entire area, with many locales having thriving monster populations. This, of course, leads to a strong guild presence within the region's frontiers. West Shrade is a mild region, with rolling green landscapes and lush forests. Within those forests lies Kokoto Village, a small hunting settlement that has produced some exceptional monster hunters in the past. The hero of Kokoto is revered by the guild to this very day. From Kokoto, hunters can venture into the Verdant Hills, a hunting locale defined by its painterly plains and sparsely forested hills. This beautiful area is deceptive, however, as it is home to many troublesome monsters. The maniraptorial birdwyvern known as the Veloci, for example, are a common sight here, and the truly unlucky few might even walk into a wrath nest. However, Kokoto is often considered a bit of a training ground for greenhorn hunters, and those go-getters for whom this might be a little too sleepy and quiet can venture to one of the larger cities in the area. Mindgard is a veritable hunter's hub, where hunters from all over the world gather to socialize, hone their skills, and embark on the toughest assignments in the area. South of Mindgard lies the port town of Meruchita. While it isn't nearly as lively as Mindgard, it serves its own crucial purpose. Meruchita is a travel hub, sending ships all across the known world. It is in fact one of only 2 ports able to send ships to the New World. East Shrade is much less welcoming. The Hinmerun mountain range splits the climate zones harshly, and while the west and the south enjoy...
Well, the 2 things we'll have to deal with is... both of them will have to deal with monsters.
Mild weather and pastoral landscapes, the east is a rocky, cold expanse with little of note besides Riveru.
Yep.
In fact, hunting activity is extremely sparse in East Shrade due to this. Further east than even Riveru, from the northern edge of the continent all the way south to the central lake, stretches out a vast wetland. The north is known as the marshlands, while the southern half is called the Old Swamp. Both of these areas are teeming with monsters, such as the Gypceros and the Kezu, and veteran hunters will know these areas very well, as they regularly produce quests and necessary assignments. At the edge of the Central Lake, deep within the eastern frontier, lies the gem of the Hunters Guild, Dundorma.
Dundorma.
Led by His Immenseness, Dundorma serves as the unofficial capital of the Hunters Guild. Its rules and decrees are respected far and wide, and so it coordinates the entire guild. It is also one of the few cities large and rich enough to maintain a strong presence of two guild militaries besides mere hunters, Guardians and Guild Knights. Guardians are foot soldiers who, having once been monster hunters themselves, are now tasked with prioritizing defense and peacekeeping instead of hunting wyverns out in the wilderness. Meanwhile, Guild Knights are sanctioned bounty hunters who chase down and execute rogue hunters that have broken the laws of the guild. This most commonly includes poachers, hunters who needlessly kill and exterminate monsters without a guild quest. Since the guild's core tenet is to maintain balance between nature and civilization, such a barbaric act generally incurs a death sentence, performed by a guild knight. In the far south of Shrade lies the Arcolis region,
Arcolis.
defined by a tropical climate. The premier hunting ground here is called the Old Jungle.
Yeah, well, I thought the Old Jungle might be connected to the jungle, but nope, it's not.
A dense bush where life thrives. Many creatures, such as the Ayo and the Yonkutku, call this place their home. Unfortunately for them,
I know it's gonna be called the. I'm sorry if I had to keep pausing it, but I know it's gonna be called like. I know they already had a name called the Jungle, but wouldn't it be cool if we have like Shrade Jungle and then we have the Tarosu Jungle? That'd be cool.
there are also many man-led operations in the area, from mining quarries to plantations, which regularly ask the guild for aid in culling disruptive monsters. In this region, at the western border of the Central Lake, lies Metapetato, a layover town that allows hunters to prepare for any tasks they may have in the Old Jungle. Meanwhile, southeast, at the southern tip of the Central Lake, lies Giowandarero, the largest city within the frontier. It serves as a crucial node in both travel and trade between western and eastern sections of the continent. It has a tendency to grow fast, and produces some of the most advanced technology within guild territory. South of the Shrade region, we find the Sekumea Desert Peninsula, where over half of all known desert surface is located. In fact, this entire massive peninsula is essentially made up of a single climate zone, arid and hot all the way through. The peninsula can still be divided into 3 subregions, however, defined by the E-shaped mountain range that goes across the entire landmass. The northern desert.
There is absolutely
No. Okay, there we go.
Desert, also known as the Dunes, is fairly rocky and sports some oases, nurturing some of the more fragile desert species such as the hermitors. While it is certainly hot, this desert is less brutal than other parts of the continent.
Alright.
This has led to 2 hunting settlements to be established here. Nestled among the spires and mountains Tsurekusara, a tiny village whose main purpose is to serve as a satellite base for any hunters that have business in the area. On the northeastern coast of the peninsula lies Port Tanzia, a large shipyard that, much like Mineguard and Dundorma, serves as a meeting spot for hunters all over the continent, in order to organize some of the more challenging hunts the guild takes on. And just like Meruchita, Tanzia can also send ships to the New World, albeit in a more roundabout way. South of the dunes, a horizontal line of mountains splits the map, and south of this split lies the central Sekumea Desert. This is a truly brutal environment, where the sun beats down on the land relentlessly. Only the hardiest monsters dwell here, such as the Bloss species and the sturdy desert Piscine wyverns. In the midst of all this death and heat, one city stands tall: Loklak. Despite the harsh environment, Loklak City thrives, producing hunters of exceptional renown, not least because of their specialized training to fight in even the worst sandstorms. Near Loklak lies the Great Moran Desert, an area of the desert with extremely fine sand stacked up hundreds of meters on top of a distant rocky floor, creating a sort of sand ocean. Periodically, the enormous Moran, mining dragons, emerge here, their blowholes spewing sand into the winds and creating sand tempests. They herald the beginning of the Moran Festival, where hunters of Loklak arm their sand ships and chase down the elder dragons, hoping to mine valuable ore from the gargantuan backs. In the furthest south sits the third and smallest sub-region of the peninsula, the Sandy Plains.
Oh, the Sandy Plains.
Being so far south, the climate is milded somewhat by the coastal air. There is even some sparse green vegetation to be found, as well as a resurgence of oases. This area is also littered with ruins of civilizations long gone, the only place on the peninsula that is the case with. This region is particularly well known for the Beroth, a mud-dwelling armored brute wyvern that is, with a few exceptions, only found here as far as its old world variety is concerned. In the ocean east of Sekumea lies the functionally named Island District, a collection of islands of varying sizes. They all exhibit similar climates, being generally mild and warm, with the islands further east containing some tropical zones. While this region is fairly small, it contains two important major settlements. The largest western island is called Moga, and its namesake village may be small, but has had a large impact on the guild. This village is the only place that trains its hunters in the art of fighting underwater, which makes Moga hunters indispensable when dealing with leviathans and Piscine wyverns.
Yep.
It was this skill that allowed one Moga hunter to discover the underwater ruins that run throughout the entire archipelago, a massive breakthrough for the Royal Scriveners. This also led to the discovery of the Cedius, an ocean-dwelling elder dragon covered in algae. Moga Island is also sometimes called the Deserted Island, due to the vast, uninhabited areas that stretch all over it. These areas are home to many fierce monsters, most infamously the Lagiacrus. The woods around Moga do however exhibit a staggering amount of biodiversity beyond that, with the island turning into a veritable cacophony of rare and powerful monsters at night. The second settlement of note is Berna, located on the largest southern island.
Oh, Berna.
This island was discovered by the Royal Scriveners, to whom it stood out due to the bizarre, enormous fossils that cover the land. These fossils are so massive that one could easily mistake them for mountains, and they make an approach by sea almost impossible. After landing here with their airships, the Royal Scriveners established both the settlement of Berna as well as a secondary branch of the research division, dubbed the Wycademy. The Wycademy specializes in airship-bound research, venturing into the most unreachable locations. They have so far surveyed the ruined Pinnacle, a small island north of Berna and one of the few locations where Valstrax can be observed regularly. The Wycademy's chief research location is, however, the easternmost island of the district, the Jurassic Frontier.
The Jurassic Frontier.
This island has a tropical climate and houses many entirely endemic species. Being isolated by both sea and massive fossil mountains, the species that evolved here are truly bizarre. From the odd Larinoth to the feathered Macau to the threatening Glavenus, there's plenty to study here. North of the island district, back on the mainland, sits a volcanic peninsula called Erude.
Oh, Erude.
This region houses all of the volcanoes found in the Old World, be it the lava caverns filled with the bridal Rakna Kadaki, the volcanic hollow, or the old volcano, littered with Gravios munching on the volcanic rock. Naturally, the presence of so much volcanic activity doesn't make it ideal for settlements, but nonetheless, 2 towns exist here. Nganga serves as the region's satellite base, allowing hunters to rest and stock up before venturing into the fiery depths. Meanwhile, Hearth is the home of the Tovirians, a race of blacksmiths that use the lava flow to create some of the best equipment known to the guild. Their services are often employed and highly valued. Another interesting thing to note is that the body of water between Erude and Tanzia is sometimes called the Tainted Sea.
The Tainted Sea.
This goes back to an incident in which civilians reported seeing that stretch of water turn a deep red, supposedly from the blood of 1 million freshly perished fish. What caused this, or really whether it actually happened at all, was never discovered, and while the guild abandoned the case, the imposing name stuck around. North of Hearth and east of Dundorma lies the Valhabar region. Surrounded by an arm of the central mountain range that reaches throughout the continent, this region houses the only desert on the Old World that is outside of Sekumea. Just like the Great Moran Desert, the Valhabar Desert is also made up of deep, fine sand, and as such it also sports its own unique species of mining dragon, the Daren Moran. In the south of the desert lies Valhabar City, a thriving hub for both hunting and commerce. Southeast of Valhabar lies the tropical Terosu region, one of the most vibrant and active areas of the Old World. The Central Mountain Range's final branch spreads across Terosu's north, and it is here where the elusive village of Yukumo lies. High in the mountains, Yukumo sits undisturbed, a haven of hot springs that relax the weary soul. Around Yukumo stretch the misty peaks, high plateaus shrouded in fog year-round. They are home to elegant and revered beasts, such as the Zenogre and the Mizutsune, and the wood cut from the trees here can be made into highly powerful weaponry, provided the smith is from Yukumo, of course. Much of Terosu is covered in forests and jungles of various kinds. In the northwest, closest to Valhabar city, sits the Ancestral Steppe.
The Ancestral Steppe.
These ancient plains are a testament to nature's victory.
Make this the
Fucking hell, no. No. I could have an ad block, but I'm not gonna do that because it's an asshole thing.
Overgrown and sun-kissed remnants of times gone by. There is also talk of another forest around here, the mysterious Everwood, a forested, derelict city whose shape and path constantly seem to change, like magic. The guild has, however, chosen not to comment on this specific rumor at this time. In the middle of Terosu sits Kamura village, or rather, New Kamura. This village, as well as the surrounding shrine ruins, were long afflicted by a phenomenon called the Rampage, which caused hundreds of monsters to attack human settlements in a frenzy. It was such an attack that destroyed the original Kamura village, whose survivors later established New Kamura. Kamura's culture borrows a lot from Yukumo, and it is assumed that the original Kamura village may actually have been founded by people that left Yukumo. Kamura hunters are quite easily identified by their wirebugs and the canine companions unique to this region. On the southern coast of Terosu, and of the continent for that matter, lie 2 more towns. Jumbo Village, which rose to fame after a local hero managed to slay a Lunastra, and Chico Sands, surrounded by the ancient primal forest and almost exclusively inhabited by felines. The primal forest is itself an elusive hunting location, where many dangerous creatures dwell, living in the shadow of massive skeletons of species long extinct. The eastern edge of Terosu is also the most humid, creating wet habitats. Southeast, hunters find the flooded forest, an area that regularly experiences flash floods and sees much of itself submerged in muddy water periodically. This is a location that often calls for the aid of a Moga hunter. Northeast lies the namesake of the region, the Terosu jungle. This massive forest is home to many species, and it is often considered dangerous to traverse because of it. Recently, however, the guild discovered what seemed to be ruins of some ancient civilization, buried beneath the dense bush. Thus, activity has increased despite the threat of creatures like the Astalos. In the far north of the continent, the central mountain range fuses into another group of rocky peaks, the Furahia Mountains. Here, the climate is harsh and cold, and the region north of the mountains is downright Arctic. Despite this, settlements yet persist. Off the northeastern coast, on a tiny island, sits Elgado, a satellite outpost for a much larger kingdom. This settlement is only temporary, and serves specifically to investigate monster activity in a nearby area called the Citadel. This taiga region was once a vestige of the kingdom, with a thriving human population. But after the local guardian Elder Dragon inexplicably unleashed its fury onto the populace, the area was abandoned, with Elgato tasked to pick up the pieces. Soon after, a massive sinkhole appeared, the enormous chasm furthering the mystery of what exactly was going on here. North of the mountain range lies Poke Village, a sleepy town that braves the harsh winters admirably. With a town square crowned by a giant piece of macalite and a mysterious cave that yields rare materials, Poke is an excellent place to rest and stock up before venturing into the frost. Nearby, hunters can explore the Arctic Ridge, a snowy and mountainous locale that houses many powerful adversaries, such as the Blangonga, the Gammoth, and the Tigrex. On the northern coastline, one finds the Frozen Seaway, a giant sheet of Arctic ice that freezes all unprepared hunters without remorse. This is one of the few places where the Zamtrios is found. Off the Frozen Seaway lie the Frost Islands, a polar archipelago with a somewhat more moderate climate due to sitting in a temperature pocket. This small collection of snowy rocks is only of real import due to its historical relevance. It was the site of the very first use of the guild's dragon ships, where early hunters successfully slayed a massive mountain dragon, at the cost of their lives. East of the main Old World continent lie two more known landmasses.
What are the other ones?
The large eastern continent is called Fonron, and has been dubbed the Lost Continent. This name stems from the observation that it is absolutely full of ruins and derelict cities, suggesting some large civilization once lived there. Now, only monsters rule Fonron. This is especially apparent in the Tower, a colloquial name given to a massive network of ruins in the central mountainous region of the continent. These ruins seem to attract some of the toughest...
Oh, for fuck's sakes. Here. Sorry about that.
Monsters ever observed, including the mighty rare species. Southern Fonron, meanwhile, is covered in one massive forest, called the Great Forest. Many Old World species can be found here, but its distinguishing feature is the occasional sightings of the rare and bizarre elder dragon known as Yamatsukami. South of Fonron lies a much smaller place, a crescent moon archipelago called Shiki Country. This country was isolationist for much of its existence, and not by choice. The islands are crowned by massive rocky crags that make approaching by sea travel essentially impossible. It was only after the deployment of airships that contact could be established. The capital of Shiki country is Cathar,
Oh,
where
Cathar.
barbarians humbly farm and aid any hunters that come by on assignments. It is this town that is said to have originated the art of melding. The main island of Shiki has two major peaks, both of which are of concern to the guild. There is Heaven's Mount, a collection of stormy mountains where many dangerous wyverns dwell. Its highest point, the Sanctuary, is one of the few known molting spots for the Magala, and the guild regularly sends scholars to study this exceptional species of elder dragon. On the northern tip of the main island lies the Speartrip Crag, the highest point of Shiki country. This area is not a regular hunting ground. It is in fact strictly forbidden to thread here, due to the presence of the Dalamadur, the Emperor Snake Dragon, whose titanic, coiling body makes these mountains look like mere perches. South of Shiki lies one of the Lon and Shiki are collectively called the Old World.
Yep.
All maps originate from here, and most of the guild's activity is limited to these areas. However, over the last 50 years, the guild's research commission has sent 5 fleets across the Western Ocean, the West Wyvern Sea, to a newly discovered western continent so far only called the New World. The New World is only barely explored due to its size,
Yeah.
its dangerous terrain, and the limited supplies of the settlers. The 5 fleets, all specialized in a different discipline, ventured here in pursuit of the Elder Crossing, a mysterious event where elder dragons migrate to the New World en masse. In order to conduct this research, a base of operations was established. Astera, the
Astera.
town built from the broken and disassembled ships of the arriving fleets. Built around the ribcage of a giant skeleton, Astera allowed for thorough exploration of at least the New World's southern third. In the west, the ancient forest stands tall, where its mighty trees form enormous canopies and house many entirely endemic species. In the east, the sands of the Wildspire Wastes stretch far and wide, the towering anthills breaking up the dunes of the desert. In the center of the continent, a bizarre circular mountain range dominates the landscape. These mountains are entirely insurmountable without an airship, and the New World hunters were only ever able to explore it through the discovery of the Great Ravine, a crack in the range created by a passing Zora Magdaros. In the center of the ravine lies perhaps the most magical display of the entire continent. The Coral Highlands, a teeming wonderland where non-aquatic corals have transformed the landscape into a colorful cornucopia. This explosion of life is however only possible due to what lies beneath it, a putrid graveyard known as the Rotten Vale. Many New World creatures migrate here when they sense that they are about to die, and their cadavers become the fertilizer for not just the Coral Highlands, but the entire continent. As a subterranean network called the Everstream allows bioenergy to flow freely across the land. Death begets rebirth. The further north one ventures into the New World, the more dangerous it gets. The volcanic Elder's Recess regularly attracts elder dragons. In the far northeast of the continent lie the Guiding Lands, where the laws of climate and ecosphere break down as deserts, jungles, and tundras grow beside each other, the mutated creation of a giant dragon releasing its life energy upon death. Not far off, the chasm of the secluded valley gapes into the land.
Hey.
While
Oh,
many hunters
he's
speculate
invisible.
about the horrors that may lie there, the guild has so far refused to elaborate. And in the northwest, across an intermediary body of water, lie the hinterlands, where the second
hinterlands.
settlement of the continent,
The elder
Seliana,
races must
was
be
founded
on top.
during the Everworm incident. This Arctic region is only accessible to master hunters, due to the dangerous monsters that patrol the icy wastes. Seliana was in fact only able to be established due to the use of geothermal vents.
Yep. Yeah, and yeah, I don't know. I know this. He focused on like the mainline series thing, but he could have put like frontier things like Mesoportia might be an island or something near the Forlorn area, or what's it called? Or something in Monster Online could be there. He could have done that.